The United States' public debt dates back to the Revolutionary War and has fluctuated over time. It's often measured as a percentage of GDP. The highest point was during World War II, followed by a decline. Since then, it's generally increased, except for some periods. Notably, it rose during the 1980s, fell in the 1990s, and spiked after the 2007-8 financial crisis. The COVID-19 pandemic in 2019 to 2021 also drove our public debt due to economic support measures. Nowadays, the United States is facing serious economic crisis because the Republican-led House is refusing to allow the government to borrow more money unless President Joe Biden agrees to reduce current and future spending and impose new restrictions on social programs. If they don't reach a compromise soon, the US could lose its reputation as a stable global economic leader. This could lead to delays in retirement and veterans' benefits for millions of people, as the government won't have enough money to pay its debts due to limits set by Congress. If the US defaults on its debts, it will have a big negative impact on the financial markets and could lead to a recession. This means a lot of people could lose their jobs and families might feel very insecure about their finances. After a weekend of arguments between House Republicans and the White House, President Biden is meeting with House Speaker Kevin McCarthy on Monday to try to fix the economy and prevent this disaster. It's a big deal because when Biden was in Japan, he couldn't even promise other world leaders that the US wouldn't mess up the global economy. There's a lot of pressure on the upcoming meeting because Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen has warned that if the Congress doesn't raise the debt ceiling by June 1st, the government won't be able to meet its financial commitments. But even before that date, just the idea that this crisis can't be resolved could cause panic in the financial markets and damage confidence in the US's ability to pay its debts. President Biden initially said that he wouldn't negotiate on the debt limit, which needs to be increased to cover spending that Congress has already approved, including from its own presidency and previous ones. His team argues that it's irresponsible for the GOP to use this critical issue as leverage to get what they want. On the other hand, Republicans believe that the government is spending too much money and see the threat of financial disaster as their main way to pressure Biden. While President Biden was in Japan on a trip that he had to cut short, there were some positive signs in the negotiations between both sides, but then they hit a roadblock and each side blamed the other. President Biden suggested that certain Republicans in the House who support Donald Trump were willing to harm the economy to hurt his chances of getting re-elected. I think there are some MAGA Republicans in the House who know the damage it would do to the economy, and because I am president and a president is responsible for everything, Biden would take the blame, and that's the one way to make sure that Biden's not re-elected, he said in Japan. House Speaker McCarthy claimed that President Biden was changing his stance because of pressure from the more left-leaning members of his own party, whom he referred to as the socialist wing. McCarthy suggested that Biden should move away from this faction and instead focus on representing the broader interests of the entire country. The tension between President Biden and House Speaker McCarthy started to ease a bit after they had a productive phone call with Biden while he was on an Air Force One returning home. In Washington, negotiations often involve ups and downs, suspended talks, and accusations of bad faith. This kind of conflict tends to happen when there is a typical point in negotiations before a final deal is reached. Both McCarthy and Biden have reasons to show their own party members that they are being tough in these negotiations. However, what makes this situation more serious is that it's not like previous disagreements between presidents and Congress. But what would be the consequences if the United States breached the debt ceiling? The debt over the debt ceiling has led some economists, like CFR's Brad W. Setzer, to consider the once unthinkable possibility of the United States defaulting on its debts, which means it can't pay what it owes. This would lead to chaos for both the US and global economies. Even if a default is avoided, reaching the debt ceiling would severely limit the government's ability to fund important operations like national defense and entitlement programs such as Medicare and Social Security. Potential consequences of hitting the debt ceiling include a downgrade in the country's credit rating by rating agencies, higher borrowing costs for businesses and homeowners, and a decrease in consumer confidence. These factors could severely impact the US financial market and push the country as well as the global economy into a sudden recession. I think it's pretty safe to say that if we were to default, it would make the odds of a recession almost certain. former Treasury Secretary Jacob Lew said at a CFR event in April 2023. Additionally, a default resulting from this breach could lead to the loss of 3 million jobs, making the average third-year mortgage $130,000 more expensive and raise interest rates enough to increase the national debt by $850 billion as estimated by the think tank Third Way. Furthermore, higher interest rates could divert future taxpayer money away from important federal investments in areas like infrastructure, education, and healthcare. Treasury Secretary and former Federal Reserve Chair Janet Yellen emphasized that failing to meet the government's financial obligations would cause severe harm to the US economy, the livelihoods of all Americans, and global financial stability. With that, let's see when the last time the United States was debt-free. The last time the United States was debt-free was in 1835. During that year, the US government managed to pay off all of its outstanding debt, which means it didn't owe any money to anyone. This period of being debt-free was relatively short-lived, lasting for just 1 year. This achievement was mainly the result of a strong US economy at the time, which generated enough revenue through taxes and other sources to cover the government's expenses and pay off its debts. It's important to note that the US has had debt since then, as the government often borrows money to fund various projects, respond to crises, and manage the country's finances. But the main question now is, how can the United States fix our national debt? The first approach to addressing the national debt is to increase the retirement age for Social Security benefits. This means that people would need to wait until their 70s instead of their 60s to receive their full Social Security benefits. By doing this, it could lead to several benefits. Number one, increased contributions. People would continue working and paying into the Social Security system for a longer time, which would result in more money flowing into the program. Number two, reduced dependency. With a higher retirement age, individuals would rely on Social Security for a shorter period, which can help to lower the overall cost of the program. The original retirement age for Social Security was 65, but because people are living longer and healthier lives these days, some argue that raising the retirement age, as was done in 1983, is a sensible step. This means that future generations might have to wait until the age of 70 or even later to receive full Social Security benefits as a way to help address the national debt. Another way to address the national debt is by implementing a national sales tax similar to what some other countries have done. For instance, Canada has a 5% national sales tax on most goods and services. This type of tax, known as consumption tax, is favored by some economists because it doesn't discourage people from working or saving, as higher income or investment taxes might. Japan, a heavily indebted country, also turned to a sales tax to address its fiscal challenges. It recently increased its national sales tax to 10%, and the International Monetary Fund even recommended doubling it up to 20%. Implementing a national sales tax could provide a new source of revenue to help reduce the national debt. And there you have it. In a nutshell, the US is facing a serious economic crisis with the debt ceiling debate. Breaching it could lead to a recession and other problems. Solutions include immigration policies, raising the retirement age, or implementing the national sales tax. Now, here's something to think about. How can our leaders find a balance between financial responsibility and the well-being of our citizens and the world economy? Let me know in the comments section below. If you found this information helpful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more insightful content on important topics like this.